It is my pleasure today to have a most amazing guest, Dr. Neal Barnard, who is an adjunct professor at the George Washington School of Medicine. He is the president for the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. He's the founder of the Barnard Medical Center in Washington, D.C. He's written over 70 scientific publications and 18 books. Wow. Thank you so much for taking time to be here today.
Well, it's great to be with you today.
Well, I have one of your books. This is The Cheese Trap.
Right.
To me, it really hit home. Wow. Because like you go into the grocery store, I mean, before I became plant-based, you go into the grocery store and you pick up some cheese and you're like, yeah, okay, just throw it in the cart. But how can you discuss how cheese is made? Just kind of give us an overview.
Well, yes. And let me maybe mention, if you don't mind, sort of where this book came from, because it's a funny thing to have a book called The Cheese Trap. What's that about? And the genesis of it was actually, we were doing a research study here with people with diabetes, and we would use a totally plant-based diet, meaning no meat, no cheese, no dairy at all. And people did great. I mean, they would lose weight, their cholesterols would fall, and their diabetes came under much better control. Sometimes it would go away. However, I would hear people say, I feel better than I felt in a long time, but even so, sometimes I really miss cheese. I thought, why? You haven't been eating it, and you've lost weight, and you're doing so well. So, I don't know. I'm just craving, and they weren't craving other things. It was specifically cheese. Yeah, I'm with you. So anyway, the question was, why? And so I started looking into it, and I found really three things. One is that cheese can really contribute to weight gain. To a surprising degree. Number two, it contributes to a lot of other health problems apart from weight gain. And third is it's surprisingly addicting. And I'm going to actually use that word. And so I thought people should know about this because A, there's a way out of it. And B, when you find the foods that you are consuming when you break your love affair with cheese, the foods you're consuming are actually better and more exciting, and the way you feel is better than it had been before. So I found that really a cool thing, and so that's where The Cheese Trap is from. But anyway, so with that preface, you asked me,
how do you make cheese?
What cheese? Yeah, where cheese comes from? Cheese comes from the cheese plant. You just take the box of cheese off.
No, quite.
Okay, so it starts early in the morning. The milk trucks come into the cheese factory and they pour the milk into a big bin that looks like a wading pool. And then to get the milk to start to ferment, you have to add bacteria. The bacteria will act on the lactose, sugar, and to an extent the proteins in it. They're fermenting it, creating that musty smell that is cheese. And you might say, well, which bacteria do they use? Between your toes, there are bacterial species called Brevibacteria, B-R-E-V-I, Brevibacteria. And if you happened to remember having a college roommate who didn't wash his or her socks for an extra long period of time, that funky aroma coming out of the closet and everywhere else is Brevibacteria fermenting the oils or the other parts of the, say, skin cells and that kind of thing. If you're making a really rich Munster or Limburger, you don't use something like Brevibacteria. That's exactly the genus of bacteria that they use. So when people talk about stinky feet cheese, that's what it is. So I'm sure I've cheered you up so far already, but we're only just getting started.
We're just getting started.
We're just getting started. So this is the beginning of the cheese,
okay.
and now, but it's still this liquid, smelly stuff, and you're stirring it with paddles, and then now I need to solidify it. So I need to add some rennet, R-E-N-N-E-T. Rennet is an enzyme. Traditionally, it comes from the fourth stomach of a slaughtered calf. But most cheese factories today use genetically engineered rennet.
Okay.
Either way, it's an enzyme that curdles the milk. And so you now have these solid globs. And then the liquidy part that is left is called whey, W-H-E-Y, and that's drained away. And that leaves you with cheese. And now the last thing is to stop the fermentation from going too far, I'm going to add salt, sodium, a lot of it. And so the sodium goes in, and that kind of stabilizes the bacterial action, and now you've got cheese.
Wow.
So that's where it came from.
Well,
And in the process, I should tell you, in the process, this increases the calories. Milk going to cheese, much more calories, more fat, more protein, a lot more sodium. So whatever was in milk is really accentuated in the cheese.
wow, because that was my next question is like, what's the average caloric intake of cheese? I mean, just how fattening is it?
The average person in a year consumes about 35 pounds of cheese, which, by the way, a century ago when the USDA started tracking, it was 3.8 pounds. In 1909, the average American ate 3.8 pounds of cheese. Today, it's about 35 pounds of cheese per person.
Wow.
And calorie-wise, that works out to 65,000 calories. The average American consumes 65.
What?
Yeah. And conversely, what that means is, what if I broke my cheese addiction?
Right.
I would save 65,000 calories a year. Just, from the cheese that's on top of a sandwich or on your pizza or whatever. Yeah. 65,000 is a lot. And some people more.
Yeah, because there's those people that just open the refrigerator door and just, get that cheese and just start snacking on it.
That's it. I mean, the number I gave you is just the average. That's the national average. Some less, but some a lot more.
Well, you mentioned there's mild opiates in the cheese. Why are they there? Where did they come from?
They're called casomorphins. They come from casein, Casein, casein. That's the main protein in cow's milk. And a protein is like a string of beads. Mm-hmm. If you could look at it under a powerful microscope, it's like a string of beads. Each bead is an amino acid, and in your digestive tract, they break apart, and each amino acid comes loose, and you can absorb it into your bloodstream, and you use those amino acids to make proteins of your own. Except casein doesn't quite behave that way. It does release some individual beads, but it also releases little strings that have 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 beads, amino acids. They go to the blood, through the blood to the brain, and attach to the same receptors that heroin or morphine would attach to. And so they're called casein-derived, morphine-like compounds, casomorphins.
Right.
And the casomorphins are opiates, the most potent. They're not as strong as morphine, obviously, but the most potent has about 1/10 the brain binding power compared with pure morphine. So it's not enough to get you arrested, but it's more than enough to get you hooked.
Addicted.
Why is it there? Why is it there? I don't know why it's there, but I'm gonna tell you what I think. If a calf did not like nursing and said, hey mom, I'm not gonna breastfeed for the next couple of days, I'm gonna go play in the woods, that calf's not gonna do well. And if you ever look at the face of a nursing baby, they are so intent. And then when they're done, they collapse into sleep. They're unconscious. And, you just drug the kid, basically. What we think is happening is that Mother Nature, so to speak, built into milk a little bit of feel-good that makes the child want to nurse and want to bond with mother, and also has kind of a calming sensation. So it's an anti-anxiety effect.
Wow.
It's a very mild, totally natural opiate, and there's some of it in milk, but it's concentrated when you make cheese.
Even more. Well, you'd mentioned earlier about the sodium levels. I mean, just how high are we talking?
For comparison, if I take another really high salt food like potato chips, 2 ounces of typical potato chips have about 330 milligrams of sodium. 2 ounces of cheddar, 350. 2 ounces of Edam cheese, about 500. 2 ounces of Velveeta, 800 milligrams of sodium. I'm talking about one single 2 ounce serving. Hold on to your blood pressure. It's one of the really high sodium foods. If it were any worse, it would be Vaseline. I got to tell you, it is so high in fat, cholesterol, sodium.
What we like, the fat. Michael Moss wrote about that. The fat, sugar, salt. That's what is addicting.
I think that's really it. We were talking about the casomorphins being the addicting part, but it's also, if you think about anything that's fatty and salty, onion rings, potato chips, French fries, people really go for that. And so I know exactly what you mean. So I think that is it. So it's those sensual characteristics plus the direct brain effect makes cheese just different from other foods.
It does. It very much so. It was one of the toughest things for me to give up. It really, and still, I mean, my husband, thank goodness, like when we go out at like a function, thank goodness my husband like sticks right near with me, because like I'll break. I mean, I will. It's not in my house. I don't buy it. I don't put myself into the situations, but sometimes I have to be for, jobs or whatever. And yeah, it's tough. It really is tough.
It really can be. When I ask people who are going vegan which foods they miss the most, that's right at the top of the list. I have to say though, in the course of writing The Cheese Trap and talking with other people about it, a lot of people find that when they learn the surprising health effects of it, it makes them less attracted to it. And also, I have to tell you, the environmental part of it and the what the cows go through on a typical dairy has been so surprising for people to learn that they think, all right, it just takes all the fun out of it, out of the cheese, and it makes you think there's got to be a better way to top my pizza, and there is.
Well, there is. I mean, there's some really great cheeses that are coming out, plant-based cheeses. I mean, not to say that that's going to be great for weight loss, but But
those, I think of them as methadone. If you are addicted to that cheddar, whatever it is, the vegan cheeses, there's one called Kite Hill. They use exactly a cheese making process, but they start with almond milk instead of cow's milk, and they make a cheese that is wildly popular, totally botanical. Tree Line is another one. Miyoko's is another one, and I mean they're really good. And they're healthier, but they're not really low calorie. They're cholesterol free.
It's not a low cal snack, no.
No, they're not, and they are a snack, not a food group. You don't want to be taking huge amounts there.
No. Well, you mentioned in the book that a lot of the cheese contains estrogens. So where are these estrogens coming from, and how is it impacting our health?
This has been really the cutting edge right now, and we don't have all the answers, but let me tell you what we know. The first thing is that cows don't make milk until they have been impregnated, and then they give birth. And so on any typical dairy, the cows are impregnated every year, and they're pregnant for about 9 months, similar in duration to a human pregnancy. And then they give birth, and then after 3 months, years up, they're impregnated again. So 3/4 of their lives, these cows are pregnant. A pregnant cow makes estrogens of a variety of types. They get into the blood plasma, and then from there they get into milk, a little bit more concentrated, especially as the pregnancy reaches term. And it's only just traces, but it's just because the cows are pregnant. However, what got us worried, first of all, some researchers at Harvard did some studies on male fertility. And they showed in a couple of studies that the men consuming the most, specifically cheese, had the worst sperm counts, the worst sperm morphology, meaning the shape of the sperm, and impaired motility compared to guys who were avoiding the cheese. And so that raised this question of, well, it's only a trace of female hormones. Could it really affect a man's fertility? And the answer is it seems to.
Is it bioaccumulative?
I don't know, but I'm going to guess probably not. In other words, if you stopped eating cheese tomorrow, my guess is that your estrogen levels would go right down very quickly, unlike something like dioxin, which, by the way, may also be in dairy product. I mean, there are animal bodies accumulate a lot of toxins of various kinds, industrial toxins and others, and they often go into milk, both in cows and also in humans. A mother, a human being, will give a lot of her dioxin load to her firstborn child and somewhat less to the other kids. But anyway, so where were we? I think I got thrown off a little bit.
Estrogens, we were just talking about them.
Yes. All right, okay. Oh, yes. Oh, I know what I want to tell you. I want to tell you about a California study. Affecting male fertility is one thing, but in a study with women who had breast cancer, if you have had breast cancer and you've been successfully treated, you got one thing on your mind, which is this cancer going to ever come back?
Yeah, you just keep waiting for the shoe to drop.
Yeah, and you're hoping it never does, and you're hoping the treatment really was fine. But what you're thinking about is there could have been a cell that escaped. It's somewhere in my body, and it could come back, or I could get another primary, or whatever. researchers in California looked at a large group of women, all treated successfully for their breast cancer, and then they tracked their food intake. And the women who consumed the most high-fat dairy, that's butter, cheese, maybe whole milk, the women who consumed the most had a 49% higher risk of dying of their cancer compared to the women who ate the least. But the most frightening part was how much. The women who had the higher risk were the women who consumed 1 or more servings a day.
Just 1 or more?
Correct. The women who were at the least risk were, in this study, was the group who consumed less than half a serving. So in other words, we are not talking about gargantuan amounts. We're talking about everyday amounts, and we're talking about people who never heard this before. And you're exercising, you're doing everything you can to keep fit, and you had no idea that these traces of hormones could affect you.
You're not educated. When you go through a cancer treatment program, you're not educated in terms of what to avoid, how to change your diet.
That's right. And also, people have, I think, legitimately said, there's not much estrogen in milk. I mean, it really literally is only traces. And even if it's a lot higher toward the end of the pregnancy than before, it still is small. However, what some researchers have said is, number one, we are seeing effects on male fertility and in cancer survival. Number two, your body already has all the hormones that biologically it should have. So if I'm taking my little dropper and adding a little bit more with every meal, that glass is overflowing. So let me be clear on this. I don't know where this research is ultimately going. And I think we need more study on it. And I am quite prepared to believe those traces should be totally biologically innocuous. I hope that's the case. But so far, I have seen enough evidence that it's going to really make you think twice before, should I give this to my 6-year-old grandson, when we're going to the store, should he be eating cheese, or my 8-year-old granddaughter, or your spouse, or yourself, or anybody else? Because suddenly it's not just a taste. Suddenly now it's biologically active in ways that are nefarious.
Wow. Well, what are some of the health-related concerns for people that do consume cheese? I mean, you talked about breast cancer, but...
Yeah. Well, they come in different categories. For one, it's a very high-calorie food. And so weight gain is a big problem, particularly since a lot of the calories come from fat. The fat in cheese does not have to be transformed into very much of anything in order to add to your body fat. If you ate bread, your body has to break down the carbohydrate molecule and assemble fat out of it, and that wastes a lot of calories. But cheese fat, bingo, moment on the lips, forever on the hips. Secondly, it is the biggest. Cheese and other dairy products are the biggest source of saturated fat. That's a contributor to cholesterol problems, as well as to Alzheimer's. You may know the studies that came out of Chicago. Those people who eat the most saturated fat, bad fat, had 2 to 3 times the risk of Alzheimer's compared to people eating the least. And we think we know perhaps why that is, but it sure makes that grilled cheese sandwich seem a whole lot less appealing. And then the next area relates not to the fat or the cholesterol, but to the protein. For reasons I cannot explain, dairy proteins seem to cause a number of sensitivities. People with asthma, allergies, they get away from dairy products. For some reason, their asthma just settles down or goes away. Rheumatoid arthritis, same story. And not everybody has dairy as their trigger, but it's a very common trigger. And that's not the fat, that's the protein. And the last thing is hormones. So in the cheese trap, I tell the story of a woman who had endometriosis. She got away from not just cheese, but all dairy products and all animal products, and her endometriosis remitted. And the beauty of that is when you take a condition where we can never make it go away, and suddenly it goes away, and then you find of other people who have done the same kind of thing, it's remarkably empowering. So the fat content, the protein content, just the calories, the hormonal issues, they all have their own biological effects.
Wow. Well, there's so many a wide variety of different types of cheeses. I mean, you've got your basic, the golden orange processed cheese to, say a creamy mozzarella. So how does cheese get its color? Is that added, or is it just natural that way?
Well, what they'd like you to believe is that there's a little bit of beta carotene in the milk, and when you turn it into cheese, it's concentrated and that makes it more orange. Because beta carotene is what makes a carrot orange. There's a little bit of it there. However, the difference, oh, and by the way, there are species differences, like a water buffalo, which is going to be the source of mozzarella, is different from, say, a cow, which is the source of cheddar. And so mozzarella is typically white, whereas cheddar is yellow. However, if you're a cheese manufacturer, you don't want to leave things to chance, so they add a yellow color to it, and they'll write it right on the label that the yellow coloring is added. It's an extremely common thing.
Does that have a direct correlation for kids? I mean, like ADHD or, with these dyes?
Fantastic question. Don't know the answer, but it must have been 30, maybe 40 years ago. Ben Feingold wrote a book called Why Your Child is Hyperactive. Mm-hmm. And he was a pediatrician who said it's colors, artificial colors, and other artificial additives. And his research, things went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And the way things kind of shook out with it was that for most ADHD kids, it's not the colors, but for some it is. And so it's very reliably, that's their issue. Later researchers said, wait a minute, it's not just the additives, it's the food itself. It could be the dairy itself, the dairy proteins, where for one kid it might cause asthma, for another kid the inflammatory process might involve neurological structures. And so they're saying, don't just get the colors out. So it's not just chocolate milk that's bad, right. Or milk chocolate with yellow coating on the outside, like M&Ms or something, but it could be actually the milk proteins. And more research needs to be done, but some studies have suggested that if you go beyond the colors, it's good to get them out. But if you go further and actually have kids eating natural vegetables, fruits, whole grains, beans, really simple foods, that a lot of those kids will settle down from that score. And of course, you're taking out the sugary sodas and caffeine-laden sodas too, which, your 8-year-old kid should not be having a caffeine hit.
Oh my gosh, no. This one absolutely made my hair turn. You talked about the U.S. military that uses skatole for their non-lethal stink bombs. Can you connect that to cheese?
Yeah, well, you said it. There are a variety of things that come from cheese, and so yes, what you said is correct. That you can get this stinky aroma from bacterial fermentation. And you can use it in a variety of harmful ways, and the U.S. military does. And a similar one, and I don't want to gross people out totally, but
sometimes we need to be grossed out.
When Parmesan is made, there are certain bacteria that are produced, that are used to produce that funky smell, and the butyric acid and other compounds they make happen to be exactly the reasons why vomit smells. When a person throws up, it doesn't smell like what they ate. It has this putrid odor. Right. And that's because of the very same bacterial products that are used to make Parmesan. So I got to tell you, I know I might have been playing a little dirty here, but I put this all in the cheese trap because I wanted people to think of cheese as not just some fun thing between bread. Right. But it's got a whole life of its own, and some of it's got its own weird personality.
Oh my God. Well, yeah, we're going to get into a couple more of those down the road because, okay. I teach, and I see a lot of kids, when they're working out and stuff like that, they're chugging down whey protein.
Right.
Is that good for us?
I think it is one of the most brilliant things that humanity has ever done, to take whey protein and convince people to consume it. For centuries, whey protein was just this cast-off thing with cheese. So you take milk and you ferment it, and then you add the rennet enzymes, and then you get this solid cheese, and you have to drain away all that water. That watery stuff is called whey, and you can put it in a landfill. You can throw it in the neighbor's yard. If you're a dairy, you got to deal with it. And it was a big waste disposal problem. And not very long ago, somebody figured out, wait a minute. Dehydrate it, let the water evaporate off, and take that residue, the whey protein, put it in a tub, and tell people that it will help their bodybuilding regimen, because it is protein. And so it's amazing. You'll see $35 cans of whey protein being sold to people who are willing to believe it will help them. And it's just a cast off of the cheese making industry. That's all it is.
So I'll take that as a no, that's not good for us.
No, I mean, it's, first of all, you're getting all the protein you could ever need without it. Secondly, people react to proteins. And we were talking about asthma earlier, but there are many, many other things. And whey protein is one of the ones that people can be sensitized to. I don't mean everyone is, but it's just, it has just been a marketing program. That's all. It is. Okay. It is not something that you need for health benefits at all.
Thank you. Yeah. I've been telling my kids this, but they don't listen. So.
No, well, and they won't, because if you tell a bodybuilder that you're going to do just as well without it, they have near religious feelings about whatever their regimen is.
It's
their
true.
Their workout regimen, their food regimen, their favorite guru who says you should be eating 16 eggs a day. I mean, crazy stuff.
Yeah.
But people will do it in search of whatever they're in search of.
Nirvana.
And no, you're not gonna talk them out of that until their first coronary or whatever it is that makes them realize, wait a minute, maybe it wasn't so smart to be eating that.
Well, there's so many different types of cheese, from cottage cheese to cream cheese, ricotta. What makes the difference?
They're produced first from different animals, as we were talking about earlier. For example, I make feta, and feta is not typically from a cow. So, you could get feta from a sheep or a goat. And then as I mentioned, mozzarella comes from a buffalo.
That just blows my mind.
Well, it's not the buffaloes we have in Montana. It's the ones that look like a couch with those horns. And at least that's traditionally. I mean, in the U.S., they will call it mozzarella, but it might be cow direct. So it's partly species. And by the way, not every species makes milk that really works. And I got to tell you, people have tried. People have even made human breast milk cheese. Sounds creepy, but people have tried everything. And then the next question is, which bacterial cultures are you going to use? And your choice of culture will affect it. And then how long does it ferment? And for something like cottage cheese, it's still rather watery compared to a brick cheese that's really very solid. Some are aged, some are not. So something like cream cheese is relatively young and hasn't had a chance to really harden up the way maybe an old cheddar would have. So that's it. However, if the corollary question is which one is best for you, the answer is sorry. They all are kind of equal.
Yeah.
They're all in the same direction of not good.
Well, this one, oh my God. And I'm probably not going to say it right, but Casu Marzu, which in Italian literally means rotting cheese. Okay.
Yeah, it does.
This one grossed me out. Okay. First of all, share with us what it is, how it's produced, and the bigger question is, why would anybody eat this?
People are adventurous spirits. Everyone is sort of Anthony Bourdain. I don't know if you ever watched him on CNN, where he'll go to some remote area and find some wacky food that he'll put in his mouth. It's a cricket or something. Yes, this particular cheese is in Sardinia. And get on a plane, go there. And what you'll see is they take cheese and then they leave it out for a while. And flies land on it. And they lay eggs, and eggs hatch, and out comes a maggot, and another maggot, another one, and the maggots start digesting the cheese and make it into this kind of liquefied mass. And the way it is consumed is you take the cheese, maggots and all, and put it on a cracker, and then you as you're taking a bite, you hold with your other hand a card, because the maggots jump. They can jump up to about 6 inches, and you quickly pop it in your mouth, protecting your face with this card, and you swallow it. And by the way, this is not legal anymore in Sardinia, but people will still do this.
It's not legal. Okay, good. Oh, thank goodness.
So when you are next in Sardinia, they may not serve this to you, but you can find it if you look. Cheerful, isn't it?
Why? Why would you be eating something that's I don't know.
Yes, but think about that with stink cheeses too. Why do people consume something that is the product of bacterial degradation? And I don't know the full answer to that, but part of it is this. We've talked about cheese stimulating the opiate receptors in the brain.
Right.
When that happens, as the opiate receptors are turned on by the casomorphins, then they in turn stimulate the release of opiates in the brain. You get this
Right.
pleasurable sensation, and that then feeds back to everything that you saw or thought of or smelled just before the pleasure came in. So in the same way as a kid's 15 years old, and his friends find a beer behind the garage, and they decide to take a taste of it. And I got to tell you, it never tasted good to any of them. Their first taste of beer, it's bitter.
Yeah.
However, as the alcohol goes into the bloodstream and it stimulates a variety of neurological structures, including dopamine release.
Uh-huh.
And then the brain feeds back and says, okay, what were you smelling? And you start associating pleasure with the taste, the look of it, all of it. And so then fast forward 20 years, the guy, it's a hot summer day, and there's nothing he likes better than the taste of a cold beer. Cheese is the same way. You start to associate the scent of it, the look of it, the mouthfeel with the brain effect that follows. And so people then want stinkier and stinkier cheeses. It's not a logical thing. It's just related to the dopamine release.
Okay. Well, how has our cheese intake changed over the years?
Oh, massively, massively. Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, it was less than 4 pounds per person per year when the USDA started tracking. And then it percolated along until about the 60s and 70s. And that's when fast food chains became pretty ubiquitous. And there was not a burger they couldn't put some cheese on top of. And then pizza chains really drove it into hyperspace, with not only by being in every town in America and much of the rest of the world, but by gradually augmenting the dose of cheese that's there.
Stuffed into the crust. I mean, just
right.
Really.
Exactly. And this has been by design because they really want to sell a lot of cheese, and people will willingly buy it. And in contrast to milk consumption, which has been falling, cheese consumption has been rising, and it shows no sign of stopping.
Wow. Well, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time. We're going to do part 2, so stay tuned, and we're going to learn more about the cheese trap.